Hey everyone, my name is Alex Reich, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and to our monthly webinar series, Climate Conversations: Pathways to Action. The National Academies provide independent, objective advice to inform policy with evidence, spark progress and innovation, and confront challenging issues for the benefit of society. In keeping with this mission, we're excited to host these conversations about issues relevant to policy action on climate change. I'd like to acknowledge that the National Academy's Washington, D.C. headquarters is physically housed on the traditional land of the Nacotchtank and Piscataway peoples, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have been its stewards throughout the generations. We honor and respect the enduring relationship that exists between these peoples and nations and this land, and acknowledge that the expertise held by different Native communities is crucial to the work of understanding and addressing climate change. Our conversation today will be recorded and available to view right here after the event. If you'd like to ask questions, please submit them in the box below the video at any time, and we'll incorporate them in a dedicated question and answer period in the final 20 minutes. We also encourage you to participate in the polls that will appear in that same location and to give your feedback after the event in the survey linked above the video. I'm also excited to invite you to join us on November 17th at the inaugural Climate Conversations webinar on climate resilience in South and East Asia in honor of National Academy of Science member Ram Ramanathan. If you want to be notified about that and other upcoming climate activities at the academies, you can also sign up for our newsletter above. But today, we're going to talk about how to prepare for and minimize the impacts of increasingly extreme heat in the US. I'm so pleased to be joined by Natasha Desjarnette, an assistant professor at the University of Louisville and a nationally recognized expert in environmental science, whose research focuses on the health impacts of extreme heat exposure and environmental health disparities. Natasha will introduce our conversationalists and moderate today's event. Thank you again for joining the National Academies for Climate Conversations. Natasha, it's all yours.
Thank you, Alex. And I am deeply grateful to the National Academies for raising this conversation, along with our two panelists, who I'll introduce momentarily. So thank you also to the audience for your participation. So the topic of today's conversation is extreme heat. And extreme heat is a period of high heat and humidity with temperatures over 90 degrees for at least 2 or 3 days, according to ready.gov. And there are many impacts of heat on human health and well-being. Actually, heat is the top cause of natural weather-related death here in the US. And extreme heat increases our risk of heat-related illness and heat stroke. And heat stroke can be deadly if not addressed quickly. It raises our risk of heart and lung complications like cardiovascular diseases and asthma. In fact, cardiovascular disease is the leading underlying cause of heat-related mortality. Further, there are also mental health impacts, including depression, violence, suicide, and suicidal ideation. I had personal experience witnessing the health impacts of heat exposure when I watched my mom suffer from heat exhaustion once when I was a child on an extremely hot afternoon. She was short of breath, she was sweating profusely, and had this look of helplessness in her eyes that I had never seen before, and thankfully have never seen since. I will note that she is fine now, but witnessing this through the lens of a child's eyes was absolutely terrifying. This experience underscores my quest to halt climate change and prevent others from seeing their family members faced with similar heat-related health challenges. There are a number of factors that affect our ability to cope. There are a number of populations that are more sensitive to the health threats of heat, and that includes older adults, children, pregnant people, communities of color or impoverished communities, and also certain occupations like people that work outdoors, maybe in agriculture or construction. And then consider those that are without access to heat adaptive cooling features. And this can be more common among older adults or low wealth communities without access to air conditioning. Also consider geographically how this is changing. We're seeing extreme heat events in places that are not accustomed to them, like, for example, the Pacific Northwest. And then we have to say we're not experiencing any of these climate events individually. So air pollution can interact with heat to result in worse health outcomes. So the issue is that climate change is resulting in a longer and hotter warm season and causing a longer, more intense, and more frequent heat wave events. And this is concerning because, as I said, heat is already the top cause of natural weather-related death in the US. So given these increasing trends and exposure, I think that this conversation on solutions is of great urgency and great relevance. So without further ado, we'll now have a conversation about how government and community leaders throughout the country are developing approaches to reduce the risk that people face in increasingly extreme heat. So I am pleased to introduce our two esteemed speakers, two people whose work and contributions in the field of climate and health I greatly respect and admire. So I'll introduce you, and then we'll open it up for both of you to share what brought you in this space. So Julia Eiferman is a senior policy advisor for the New York City Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, where she advances programs and policies that prepare New York City communities to withstand and emerge stronger from climate change impacts with a focus on extreme heat. And also, Julie Turton is the One Health and Climate Extremes Research Lead for National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, where she leads the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, and she co-chairs the Climate Change and Human Health Group of the U.S. Global Change Research Program, as well as the Group on Earth Observations Health Initiative. She chairs the World Health Organization and the World Meteorological Organization and World Health Organization Joint Study Group on Climate Change Services for Health. So let's talk landscape, extreme heat, and what we need to think about it. Can you both share what brought you into this space? Let's start with Julia.
Hi, I think that was Julia. Well, we got the Julia thing straight. Thank you, Natasha, for that introduction, and Alex and everyone for hosting this conversation. Thrilled to be here. What brought me to this space? Throughout my career, I've worked on a variety of environmental issues, but I think a common thread looking at it is the ways in which public space is either strengthening or undermining human lives. And I think that climate resiliency is an important way that we can do the former to ensure that our built environment and cities more generally are allowing individuals and communities to live well in their surroundings. And while I think it's important from a policy perspective not to separate climate adaptation and climate mitigation too much, I think that heat adaptation and dealing with increasingly hot weather is actually a particularly effective way to engage people in climate action. Because like Natasha was saying, the experience of heat is so visceral and so relatable that it actually, I think, it's a good entry point for doing a lot.
Hey, thank you, Julia. And now, Julie T., what brings you into this space?
Well, actually, I thank you for the question and thank you for the kind introduction. I actually have been interested. I'm an environmental activist at heart from years and years as a kid and a vegetarian in high school, and my parents didn't even know what it was. And so I really got into this whole field because I care a lot about the planet and the intersection of human animal health and the planet. That's why I am actually the One Health lead at NOAA. But what got me into the heat space specifically, partly was my boss saying this is important, but also really looking at the impact of heat. I mean, we'll be talking a lot about urban heat, but heat affects so many other things. It affects ecosystems. It affects more than just urban environments. It affects even other health impacts like mosquito-borne diseases and drought and heat. It just has such a multiplying effect, and it affects almost everything in some way and almost everybody in some way. So that's the first order of business. But the second part, and the exciting part, is that almost all heat deaths are preventable. We can do something about it, whether it's an adaptation or mitigation strategy. So it brings us to a space where we can better understand the problem and its multiple impacts and even cascading impacts, but we can also do something about them. And in the course, we actually can right some injustices and some inequities in the process and really learn more about how to more positively interact with our planet along the way. So you kind of get all things when you're dealing with heat.
I love how you shared that. It affects everything and everyone in some way, but it's also highly preventable. Thank you both. So, Julia, What are some of the tools you have for helping people deal with extreme heat on different timescales, including specific communities and for different types of impacts? What are also some of those barriers to providing support?
Yeah, that it's a great framing of the question because, like we were saying before, heat, it's a hazard that we deal with every year, every summer in the present, at least here where I live in New York. And at the same time, one that is getting worse and that we know is getting worse over the long term and could catch us off guard at any point along the way. So I think the timescales are really key. We know in New York City that every summer, on average, there are 370 deaths related to heat. And like Julie's saying, these are all preventable deaths. So heat is very much a public health issue, and it's one that we know what to do about. We know who is at higher risk. In New York City, it's people without access to air conditioning, people with chronic conditions who are more likely to be older, who are more likely to be Black. And that's the result of histories of structural racism. So in the broadest sense, what we need to do is create a more equitable society, because truly poverty is the biggest barrier to resiliency and to living with hotter temperatures. So that's sort of to frame it in the short and medium term. What we need to do is to lower the barriers to residential cooling. We need to get air conditioners to people who need them. We need to subsidize the utility so that people can actually use the air conditioners they have, and retrofit buildings to minimize the need to use the air conditioners in the first place. In the medium and longer terms, we need to address the urban heat island here in New York City. We know that cities are hotter than their surroundings, and we can do things like increase the amount of green space and trees and vegetation, creating more shade, more reflective surfaces. And so many of these things can start now, but some of them, like planting a tree, for example, will take decades to actually pay benefit and to see the impact. So that's sort of the different scales that we need to work on. You asked about barriers. I think the other barrier is just having this problem being taken seriously. It's a largely invisible hazard, unlike flooding, which is very shocking to look at. Heat isn't something you can see, and cooling and air conditioning has been historically seen as sort of a luxury, not a life-saving medical intervention. So those are some of the barriers and sort of actions, I think.
Excellent. Thank you, Julia. And now, Julie, extreme heat is often not taken as seriously over other forms of extreme weather, as Julia pointed out. Yet it kills more people than other weather-related disasters here in the US. So is this mentality around heat changing, or is it creating is it creating challenges for efforts to reduce risk?
It's a really excellent question, and thank you for asking it. And Julia, thank you for setting me up for that, because there are a couple ways of answering that. And one of them, I just want to hit on the awareness issue and the fact that heat is often referred to as the silent killer. You don't see it. I've even been told, there's money going into these other things because you can see the effects of a hurricane and a tornado. You can't see the effects of heat. So I think we have a real issue with awareness and making, if you are affected, as you mentioned, Natasha, an emotional effect, a physical effect, something, if you've experienced it, it. But unless you have, and you've had a pretty dramatic experience, it seems like it's just hot. So let me just get to the awareness issue. I think we are making good strides, but there's still a lot of work to do to make heat, the impact of heat and the need to address heat on multiple timescales, an issue in our policy world, in our funding world, in our management and planning world. So I think we still have a huge awareness issue. It is definitely getting better. The mentality is changing some, but we do still have folks like, let's just take the Pacific Northwest example. folks in the Pacific Northwest and maybe Maine and just, the northern tier who think they don't have a heat problem, well, we're seeing shifts in season, and we are seeing that that's coming, that they're not equipped with air conditioning, and they're not thinking it's a problem because historically it hasn't been a problem. But it's going to be a problem, as we're seeing. So we have that mindset that is beginning to shift, because people are going, wow, that could happen in the Pacific Northwest, maybe it could happen to me. But that's the beginning of the shift. Then you've kind of got the other side where people in the southern tier, where it's always hot, say, well, it's always hot, we don't really have a problem. But in fact, they actually do, because the nighttime temperatures are getting hotter, the heat waves are getting longer, we have just higher ambient temperatures, all kinds of reasons. So I would say programs like this, efforts like this, are making a huge dent in raising awareness across multiple sectors of our society and across our entire United States. And that isn't necessarily even dealing with the populations that may or may not think they are at risk. I mean, children and athletes, athletes that think they don't have a real risk often do, because they don't stop and think. It's the weekend, they're going to go for a run. Or you've taken a vacation, you're going to go for a hike in the Grand Canyon, whether it kills you or not, but you know what, it just might kill you. So we have to really message about this differently while we are understanding the questions and the research and the solutions about it. So it's changing, but we're not there yet.
We're glad to hear the good news that it is changing, but as you point out, we do have more work to do. I noticed this summer more reporting around extreme heat and connecting that to health. So we've seen some progress evidence in that type of way, but more work to be done, certainly. So let's do a deeper dive on the implications of extreme heat for policy and planning, including the availability of information and tools to support people and communities who are working on adaptation plans. But as we continue this discussion, I want to remind the audience to please ask questions at any time in the Slido box below the video. We already have a couple coming in, so we'd love for you to continue sending questions at any point. Don't wait to the end when you might forget it. So let's start with Julie this time. What role does the federal government have in building resilience to extreme heat as compared to state or local governments or individuals, the private sector, and so on? And in particular, what is the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, or heat.gov, and what do you hope to achieve through it?
That is such a loaded question, a good loaded question. So I'm going to try to answer it succinctly, because that could be like the whole thing. So I don't want to do that. Basically, I'm going to start with a policy answer, actually. And in the federal government, heat is one of those issues that really does fall between the cracks of agencies. Everybody's got a little piece of it. Everybody's got a distinct role to do X, Y, or Z, but managing it cohesively is still a bit of a challenge. And this administration has improved that considerably. But even in as early as 2015, NOAA, our weather service, and the climate program, and the Centers for Disease Control launched what is called the National Integrated Heat Health Information System. And it was designed specifically to pull together the parts of the federal government, and I'll get to the state and local in just a minute, because that's also a really important component here. But we wanted to we knew that heat waves were going to increase. We knew increases in ambient temperature were going to go up. We knew these things were coming. We saw the long-term projections, and we were seeing seasonal shifts already. So we wanted to do a better job of managing heat risk on multiple timescales, not just doing a better job of predicting the next heat wave, but managing the entire complexity of the situation over timescales and across agencies when there is no federal mandate for all of our agencies to actually do that. So we have working group now, we started NIHIS specifically to do that. We started under the National Security and Infrastructure Framework, but that was the whole point, was this is a potential huge instability with a cost and a threat to life and livelihoods. So the federal government is coordinating through NIHIS, and has been for a long time. We recently launched heat.gov under the NIHIS group, launched it. We're very active and part of this new White House interagency working group on extreme heat. That's bringing folks like Federal Emergency Management Agency to the table, the Housing and Urban Development, Transportation, and those of us who like Health and Human Services in its many parts, OSHA, NOAA, two that have already been working together. We're adding some of the longer term planning folks to the table that really we would want to have been there all along. So we're really trying to get that whole end to end, and the interagency component of NIHIS is designed for that. Now, that's the context under which we launched heat.gov, because that's the portal where you can find what you need from your federal government on heat. Everybody still has their own site and more information on it, but that's the starting point. And importantly, it has the key resources, but it also has the forecast products, not just the heat wave. It's got seasonal forecasts and other things. So we're really trying to get to this management before a heat wave, and really thinking beyond just heat waves. In fact, most of the deaths occur on the fringes of a heat wave, not actually during the heat wave, or around ambient temperatures and increased nighttime temperatures. So to focus only on the heat wave, while it's a good start, really won't cut it in the end. We have to address heat more quickly. So I think then in terms of the federal role, it's, what kind of products and services can we put out? How do we best inform investments at the state and local level? How do we support our state and local partners? We have a part of the NIHIS program that is actually designed, it's called a partner network, and we work pretty closely with our state and local folks and create a space for them to learn from each other and for us to learn from them, so we can better direct investments and research and that sort of thing. So I think, I'll just say one last thing, and we are really going all the way to, OSHA's looking at its laws for protecting outdoor workers, or its regulations, not laws, for outdoor workers. And we have the General Services Administration and NIST and folks who are looking at building codes and building materials. So we really are looking across the gamut and then trying to figure out what is the best national level information that can then support state and local action, because in the end, heat impacts are very local. So our job is to kind of create a national structure that supports what we can do at the federal level, but also very actively supports the state, and maybe even as importantly, if not more importantly, the local decision makers. As Julia knows, it comes down to what's New York City going to do and how can we support you? So there's a couple layers of that we want to make sure are there. And that's what NIHIS is designed to do. And that's what this new White House Interagency Working Group is doing as well.
Excellent. Great to hear this. Thank you, Julie. And so I've got a question there in follow-up then for Julia. So what do you see as the role for local government, and how could federal and New York State government better support New York City's efforts to address extreme heat, both during events and in the long run?
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to hear from Julie all that's happening at the federal level. And there really is so much that's happening with NIHIS and otherwise. So at the local level, I think one thing we can do is make decisions around land use that take higher heat into account. We can better protect our trees and our canopy, which really provide a cooling effect over the long term, especially. We can make policy around building codes. We can make local laws around, temperature thresholds. We can also, I think importantly, partner with community-based organizations and elevate sort of community members who are the trusted messengers that really will be able to reach those people most vulnerable during heat waves. So as government, we can put out alerts and we can notify people to upcoming dangerous weather, but we can't get, we're not going to reach the people that are at the highest risk. And so we really need to partner with those trusted messengers, those CBOs and faith-based organizations, people like home health aides that have access to those folks that are at highest risk. In terms of at the federal and state levels, I think, at the federal level, one thing that we could really use is more funding for the Home Energy Assistance Program called HEAP, or LIHEAP, is an HHS Health and Human Services benefit that helps low-income households pay for their utility bills. And we need that funding to be more flexible, to allow it to cover cooling and just more of it, acknowledging that, higher prices of utilities. And similarly, more flexible funding, I think, for hazard mitigation through like FEMA, for example, in order to do infrastructure work that addresses heat, to retrofit buildings, to prepare community spaces, things like that. And there's already some of that happening through the FEMA BRIC grant program, but more in that direction would be helpful. And then in the middle, I think at the state level, particularly, there's a lot that we could use around HEAP reform. So HHS distributes this benefit as a block grant to states, but states have pretty broad discretion over how the program is structured. And so in New York State, the cooling component of HEAP can only be used to purchase and install an air conditioner every 5 years, but it can't be used to subsidize the cost of using it, whereas other states do allow for that. So that's something that at the state level would really help.
Well, did I interrupt you, Julie?
No, that's all for there.
Well, that's helpful information and insight, certainly resources to continue to shore up evidence-based local activities. So I'd like to go just a little bit deeper with you. What are the co-benefits or trade-offs of efforts to adapt to extreme heat? For example, how do you balance the fact that air conditioners address the immediate needs, but can also worsen climate change? And is there a way that investing in resilience can help cities revitalize in the short term?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked. Absolutely, there are co-benefits, but we of course need to acknowledge that we need more efficient forms of mechanical cooling, like air source heat pumps. We need better ways of keeping people safe. At the building level, a lot of what can be done to keep people cool in their homes are the same things that reduce energy use overall, like better insulation, better windows, better doors. So these are the things that we're looking at to reduce emissions and causes of climate change, and are also things that require jobs. So there's a real co-benefit there in sort of our transition to electrification that I think will be a co-benefit. Other co-benefits, I think a lot about some of the behavioral adaptations that we need to take. So for example, encouraging wellness checks. New York City has something called the Be a Buddy program, which is a volunteer network that checks on folks during heat waves. And this network and this social program was really useful during early COVID days. So we can take advantage of the fact that heat emergencies happen every year to sort of practice for other types of emergencies, climate and public health and otherwise. In terms of, balancing the sort of problems with air conditioning, and some people want to say it's maladaptation. I think it's really inequitable to suggest that it's not okay to give an air conditioner to my elderly neighbor upstairs, but it's fine for the server room in the office to be freezing cold. It's like we have to think about where these resources are being distributed. And beyond that, like I was saying, as we move towards electrification from a sustainability perspective, we're really going to need to address energy cost burden. And so these programs that I was mentioning, HEAP, it's not just about heat. It's really a much bigger issue.
Very powerful words to end on, and it's not just about heat. And there are a number of factors and impacts and contributors to this challenge. So before we turn to the future and to next steps, I had a question for both of you pretty quickly. There's a lot of focus on urban heat, but we shouldn't neglect other environments where people work. So how can the risk be reduced for outdoor workers as well as for indoor workers, like people that work in warehouses?
Yeah, if I could jump in on that, because I actually want to address something that Julia raised as well in terms of the LIHEAP and FEMA in terms of the federal, like the feedback. So that's really good. Not the first time we've heard that. And so we know FEMA is actually technically, heat is not covered under their law that allows them to respond. And so there's all kinds of things about, but they're showing up to the table now, trying to figure that out, adding heat into some of their scenarios and trying to work with us on how to allow cities to compete more effectively for funds that do address heat. But that is a gap, we know, but they're at the table very much trying to, figure that out on the federal side, given the constraints we have on the law side. And then Health and Human Services did make I should have probably looked before, and I'm not going to quote the exact amount, I think I know, but of the LIHEAP funds available based on the funding that they had. So if funding goes up, of course, I know they would like to be doing more. So we are trying to bolster the programs that we have that can help. And I think we're going to talk about some equity issues in just a minute, but I will say also that looking at the environmental justice aspects, EPA and NOAA and our urban heat island mapping activities are a great way to figure out where the heat load is. And we're using a new environmental justice tool to help kind of target that information. Now this gets to the federal, state, local. We can help understand vulnerabilities. We're using an environmental justice tool that includes, to include that and where the heat risk is. So it should help cities decide better, especially cities that don't have as much capacity as maybe you do in New York City, to know like how best to use the resources. We plant trees here, we paint white roofs here. But the exciting part too is that some of the adaptation options include things like urban gardening and like growing food closer to home. Of course, you have to worry about that with heat waves and all that, but there are ways that we can really get innovative in how we create more livable urban spaces. Not to your question about, it's not all about urban, I know that, but I think in the urban environment, I just wanted to say that there are some innovative solutions too, not just air conditioners, because that will help. And I agree with you, Julia, that's an inequity right there if you deny them, but we can and are being more creative about other types of solutions, from cool surfaces to tree planting to gardening and all kinds of things. So that in a way, that's a very big co-benefit, especially the garden and the outdoor spaces that we can create that both reduce heat risk, but also give urban populations and kids a chance to see where their food grows and to play outdoors. So there are co-benefits to the solutions in a huge way. So sorry, I jumped in on that, but I couldn't not. There was too much good stuff to report.
I'm so glad you added all that. I completely agree with all those co-benefits.
Yeah.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Julie. And Julia, do you have any insight on how policies to address extreme heat can avoid exacerbating existing inequities that are due to wealth or racialization, or even how to address those inequities?
Yeah, I think, it's so important, like we've been saying. And in New York City, our strategy to address extreme heat uses something called the Heat Vulnerability Index, which is how we prioritize all of our investments and interventions. And this index, HVI, is comprised, it's a combination of environmental and demographic factors that show areas where people are at higher risk of dying from heat. And like you said, these inequities of, scattered throughout the city are the result of racist policies like redlining. And these are exacerbated by heat. So to solve this problem, we need to really both reduce some of those inequities and also plan for more heat in our policies and in our design and planning.
Very important. We can't deny what we're currently experiencing. So it's important that we're able to adapt to what we're currently experiencing. And there's much work that's happening at the state level and at the local level, the state level, and the federal level to assess vulnerabilities across our communities. And there are many tools that can help inform us where we are seeing susceptibility. So we'll transition. Let's turn to the future, find some inspiration in where we can go from here. So to both of you, and we'll start with Julia, we know that it's going to keep getting hotter, just as you just pointed out. So what are some ways that we can be proactive right now about understanding and preparing for future heat challenges at both local and a national scale, including partnering across sectors?
Yeah, I think there's a lot we can do to stay current on, especially on the science. In New York City, our climate work is guided by a group of researchers called the New York City Panel on Climate Change, and they really ground us in the science that's evolving at a global scale. I think cities are different in the ways that they're going to experience heat changes, and so this is important. For example, we know that in New York City, days above 90 degrees are likely to triple by the 2050s and quadruple by the 2080s. This would make our climate more like that of Alabama. So having these sort of touchstones to understand what we're looking at, based grounded in science, is a really good idea. We talked a little bit about worker safety, which is something we know is an issue. Outdoor workers, agricultural workers, and also people who work in unair conditioned spaces. I think continuing to collect data on all of these various impacts. We have our mortality data, we know how many people are dying, but I don't think we have a great understanding of some of the other impacts. So I think that's something we can continue to do and do better.
Oh, great. Thank you, Julia. And we'll transition to Julie to answer the same question. But something that you just shared, Julia, that stood out was that the New York temperature could be like that of Alabama. That really a powerful metaphor. Julie, what are your thoughts here around ways that we can be proactive right now?
So I've got a couple, and I'll try to be succinct so we have enough time for questions here. But I think one of the ways is to really bridge the federal, state, local capacity, which we've talked about a bit. And one of the things that we're trying to do, I'll use this as an example of one way to go, but we're really working with some cities, 4 of them in the next few months, to develop some scenarios that get to the cascading impacts and failures. So one is to deal with, extreme heat and a heat wave in an urban environment, which is still important, and we have to do that. But also what happens if you have, a dust storm in the Southwest, and that's followed by a power outage and a heat wave, or these cascading failures, a hurricane followed by a power outage and a heat wave. So really trying to run scenarios that get different parts of the policy and decision structure together, because that is not just an emergency response. And even just getting emergency response and public health to talk is big, but you need transportation, you need your funders, your finance, you need other parts of governance, whether it's local or federal, to be at the table to plan differently. We have to plan differently. Plan differently doesn't save you from this particular heat wave, but in 5 years, as Julia said, you plant the tree, it grows, you start a garden movement. Things do have a lifespan that can change over time. But I really think one of the most important things is to be talking about it, raising awareness of the issue, and to plan for multiple impacts and multiple timescales. We have to be able to get to the timescale issue, or we'll just be responding to heat wave after heat wave after heat wave, and we know they're going to change. But unless we really start planning differently in our communities and in our government levels, we're going to be in the same boat. So I think that is one of the most critical pieces of planning for the future, is just really thinking about it differently and approaching it differently.
Excellent.
Yeah. Julia, you're nodding. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's really a great point about planning and cascading impacts, and especially in the context of climate more broadly, and all of the different problems we're seeing.
Yeah.
Excellent. In agreement, and much appreciated. So I have one more question for the both of you before we turn it to the audience Q&A, and there are a long list of audience questions. But from both of you, and we'll start with you, Julie, it would be very interesting to hear, in dealing with extreme heat, what would be useful from the scientific or academic community?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. We've learned a lot from our international partners too. We are a part of something called the Global Heat Health Information Network, and that also brings in perspectives from other countries. And so what's really interesting is that globally we're learning from each other about what we forecast and what are the big needs and how do we actually do these scenarios. And some of the things that keep coming up both within the US and globally are, one part is just about the heat wave. What is the upcoming heat season going to look like? Is it going to start earlier? Are the heat waves going to have a higher minimum temperature at night? Because that's really important. Are we going to have longer term ambient temperatures? You know, just what is the character of the upcoming heat season and what kind of lead times can we have about that? That's one thing we hear a lot because it will facilitate planning on different time scales. There is a huge issue about the health data, morbidity and mortality, and sort of the economics and the benefits. And just that part is we're not very good at yet. And I think we really need some work on that. Some things also about what actually elicits protective behavior on whatever time scale, whether you're, you know, an outdoor worker or whether you're, you know, inside or you're elderly, what is actually going to help you take protective action and how do we get to you in the best way? So more of a social science and a behavioral issue. And then I would say there's really what's working in cities. And sort of one of the things we're excited about in NIHIS, and I hope others as well, is really getting our cities and our communities together. And internationally, I'm actually in Geneva with folks who are working on heat and really want to talk to each other almost at the city level, like what's working for you, what's not working, how did you communicate that? So I think we really have to do that as well. And there's a enormous opportunity with these, you know, global networks and national networks to kind of facilitate a very local exchange. So we're excited about that too. I think that's a burgeoning area for just shared learning locally.
Yeah, I'll echo what Julie said about the need for social science research. I think better understanding what motivates people and what messages will really drive protective behaviors would be very useful. Another area that I think science and academics could help us with is better quantifying the risk of extreme heat, especially when we talk about accessing some of these federal funding sources. You know, we always are needing to put in monetary terms the cost of inaction and the benefits of action. And this will help us justify investments. And so to the extent that we can come up with quantifiable sort of benefits of heat adaptation, it'll help us unlock some of these resources.
Well,
I agree with that one, Julia.
Very good. Thank you both. So I'm going to open it up to the audience Q&A. And as I shared, there are a lot of audience questions. I'm going to try to actually group these into different topical areas to help organize our conversation. But thank you so much to all those who have sent in questions, and we welcome you to continue sending in questions. So here we'll start with Julia. I'd love for both of you to answer. We have so many questions, so if you could be as succinct as possible with your answers, that would be greatly appreciated. So apart from the governmental level, so stepping out of your roles, what can we do at the individual level? This question comes for the audience, and Julia, love to pass it to you first, and then Julie.
Yeah, it's such a great question. At the individual level, there's a lot you can do, and I think it starts with checking on your friends and neighbors and family when it's hot. You know, people who are more likely to die are those who tend to be socially isolated and may have an air conditioner but aren't using it. So at a very basic level, you know, keeping folks safe means reminding them to go somewhere cool, to, even if it's just for a couple of hours, like go to a cool room and you know, keep yourself safe.
I love that. I feel like that's some of what is learned from or informing the Be a Buddy program, which is an excellent example for the nation. And Julie, what are your thoughts here? Stepping out from the government level, what can we do at the individual level?
Some of what we have is actually very individual focused, and it's things like drinking water and rest water, shade, those sorts of things. But I want to take it one step higher and say that being aware, really understanding the signs of heat risk, whether it's in your child, in yourself, in your partner, in your coworker, in the elderly, really, we all have to take some responsibility for understanding when somebody might be in heat distress, because it is going to happen more frequently. And it's incumbent upon us, I think, as individuals and a part of society, to know what those signs are and know how to protect somebody, know what to do. Do you get them out of shade? Do you feed them water? Do you not? Do you put their feet up? No. Like, know what to do. And we have some of that information out there. It is knowable. But I think everybody understanding how to identify when somebody is in distress, and also creating a culture where it's okay for workers to say, you know what, I need to take a break. For your kids not to go to football practice. For you to talk to the coach and say, this is not okay. You have to be able to identify the risk and take some individual action that protects you and your family and the people around you.
Yeah, one other thing I'll add, I know I keep going on about air conditioning, but it doesn't have to be like 60 degrees. You just taking the edge off, right? Taking it down from 100 degrees to, we say, 78 degrees is enough to protect you without having to be wearing a sweater in July.
Yeah. And even little things like helping people with pets who, if they want to go to a shelter or a cooling center and can't take their pet, take the pet, do something to help so that they can be safe. And then also help your communities make it pet friendly in the cooling shelter. So I would also just add, look out for the pets, but that's my own. Now I'm taking my hat off, and just as a person, look out for the pets too.
Absolutely, so important. And I love what you shared, Julie, about being able to know the signs of heat-related illness. I shared with you my experience. I was a child, but as a child, so I of course did not know what I was witnessing in the moment or what to do about it, but my dad was also there. He immediately knew what was going on, knew that mom needed shade, knew that mom needed cold water, and then to get in an air-conditioned environment. So we can do that in our families, we can do that in our communities, but knowing those signs to look out for, I think, was some really helpful information. So staying along the lines of solutions, are there grants, programs for providing heat mitigation along the lines of providing cooling equipment for at-risk groups? I'll toss that to Julie.
Yes, so I wish I could say yes. There is some new, the congressional funding that came through for the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill has some funding in there for such things. FEMA does have funding for that, but as you know, it's hard for them with heat. So we're trying to sort that out. The answer is there's not a really discrete, dedicated block just for heat, but there are funds that we are trying to make available that include heat. So it's a really good question, and I wish I had a different answer. We're trying, but our budgets come from Congress, so we do what we can, and a fair bit of money coming in for climate, of which heat is a part. So I think the answer might be different in a few months. But I'm not at liberty to speak about all of that because it's still coming in and we're still sorting it out. So I would say that. The other part is that I think there are things we are doing. I mean, we're, even without new money, we're doing urban heat island mapping campaigns, and EPA's got some urban heat work. I mean, there are pockets happening, and I would say, even in terms of what can you do, get involved in an urban heat campaign. Those are like citizens, you can understand your own community's heat load that way and be involved and feel a little bit more empowered. So I would say those are some other things. But in terms of big grants, I wish I had a definitive yes, go here. I will say that as resources become available, you can check on heat.gov because they will be listed there with the timelines and all that stuff. But right now, there's not a huge long list, and I wish I had a different answer.
Well, you've given us some reason to feel empowered and to feel inspired with what might be coming down the line, and that there are thoughts around this. So thank you, Julie. And I'll send our next question to Julia. So can you discuss strategies to address occupational heat illness in New York or at the federal level? Particularly, are there examples of legislation that offers protections for outdoor workers during extreme heat?
Yeah, so I think there aren't a ton of examples yet. Certainly not yet in New York. I know at the federal level, OSHA was recently going through a rulemaking process to come up with strategies for protecting workers during heat. I believe that's ongoing. So there will be a federal standard. And I think that California has passed some legislation and has some rules around protecting outdoor workers. You know, they have such a big agricultural workforce there that we don't have as much of in New York. I also think Washington State, after those big heat waves a couple of years ago, passed some laws, but not yet in New York. It's something to look at.
All right, something to look forward to in the future, certainly. We have some examples in some other locales, and I was recently told about new legislation on this exact topic in Oregon. So I think there's much on the horizon here, certainly to be encouraged about. So I have a question for the both of you on the subject of communication. Given that heat levels will accelerate over the next decades, what are the most effective ways of informing the public to action without unduly scaring them? So I'll toss it to Julie first.
Sure. Actually, thank you for that. And that's something that we, especially in NOAA's weather service, struggle with the heat waves and warnings. And there's a warning fatigue that we want to make sure we don't induce. I think there's two answers to that. One is really understanding some of those social science questions about what motivates behavior, so we don't, overly emphasize something, or we also make sure that the forecasts are tied to the health impact. And we have a product that's currently out on the West Coast, and it's going to be piloted on the East Coast. It's called Heat Risk, it's anchored in with health data, and we've been using that on the West Coast for several years now. There's also wet bulb globe temperature, which can help with some of the outdoor workers or indoor workers, not just urban environment issues. So I think there are some science tools that we can use to help us target and better tailor when we issue a forecast, understanding thresholds better. It is always really tricky to, you don't want to miss a heat wave, but you don't want to overestimate. And I think we also really need to do some work on communicating heat risk, again, not just the heat wave part. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that as well. So I'll stop with that. But there are ways, and we are always worried about that to not create fatigue, but so you do stimulate action when it's needed.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the weather forecasters are a really important source of information. This is where most people go to learn about what the weather is going to be like and what to do about it. I think, we've noticed in the past that often when weather forecaster is talking about a heat wave, the imagery that goes along with it doesn't really get at the risk. So you'll have like kids playing in a pool, or somebody running in the park, and it's sort of a mismatch between who's actually at risk during a heat wave and the pictures that are on the news and in these forecasts. So I think, like Julie was saying, making sure that sort of the mass media messages are informed by health and informed by science, and not just too generic, will be helpful.
I also think we do need to do maybe a more tailored job moving forward on specific populations too, Julia. I know we've talked about this before, but the unhoused populations, or pregnant women and newborns, and there are specific populations that are more vulnerable. And I think over time, as we improve our ability to forecast, we can also improve when and how we message to more specific populations. And that gets to some of the inequities and sort of reaching the most vulnerable audiences that need to be reached. I think we can improve on that also moving forward.
Important point. Thank you for adding that to this conversation. So I'm going to try to squeeze in one and maybe two more questions before we need to come to a close. This has been such a rich discussion. So Julie, can you give an example of a city that has been successful in mitigating the impacts of heat waves, whether here in the US or elsewhere?
Oh gosh. boy, if I say one, there's probably gonna be others that would say, well, us too. So, I mean, I will say just, and not just to cover myself, but in all honesty, a lot of cities are really doing the best they can and looking to partner and looking to do things. So I do want to recognize that there is, back to one of your earlier questions, is the mentality changing? It is changing. Is it changing fast enough? Of course, not for any of us. I would say in the US, Phoenix, I have to go with Phoenix. It's one of those cities that's hot, but knows that it has a problem. They have a chief heat officer. They have a whole longer term plan. They've got folks looking at built infrastructure, that kind of thing too. So they're really doing a great job in Phoenix. I would also say Chicago, in some ways, partly they had the Chicago heat wave, but they are very technologically advanced with this Internet of Things that allows them to take actions that other cities don't have the opportunity to do. So that's a little bit of a drawback because it's a very heavily instrumented city, and that makes it, I'm not sure that's replicable, but, you know, and then not just because she's here, I mean, New York City's densely populated. And while you may not be doing everything you want to do, I think for the different kinds of populations and health risks you've got, and you've got such a robust climate community there. I think New York City, I would say, I know you probably think you've got a lot more to do, and I recognize that, but I think you've also done a great job. And some of our colleagues in other cities look to those cities to partner and learn from. And in fact, we've hosted populations from India, for instance, in New York City to have that conversation. So I would say, at the risk of alienating a lot of other cities, I probably should have just said no. You know, Miami has a chief heat officer. They're doing great things in Miami. So, I mean, I think the good news is it's both of the populations. The cities that don't think they have a problem are beginning to get there, and the cities that think they have one are actually doing a great job too.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I love how you showcase New York in particular as an example, as has been throughout this conversation. So last question, and we need this to be a lightning round question, maybe about 15 seconds each, as a final question, what is one thing you would like our audience to take away from today's conversation? We'll start with Julia, then we'll talk to Julie, and then we're going to go out to Alex.
All right. Thanks for the shout out, Julie. I appreciate it that we are doing a lot. Last thing, I would say so many of the solutions here have so many co-benefits. You know, this is a really broad problem that touches a lot of aspects of our society. And if we do the things we need to do, we'll really not regret it.
And I would say that while heat is a problem, heat also has so many solutions with co-benefits at every level of government. And I will just end with empower yourself, and know that on the federal side, we are also trying to empower ourselves to empower you. So I think it's finding the way to empower yourself and your community at whatever level you're working. And it is a solvable problem.
Thank you all so much. Natasha, thank you for your moderation. And thanks to you, Julie and Julia, for sharing from your work and for leading that work. To everyone who joined us for this month's climate conversation, thank you as well. The conversation was recorded and will be available to view on the same webpage immediately. I want you all to stay tuned for an upcoming Academies workshop in the coming months that will use case studies from around the country to delve deeper into efforts to address inequities and heat-related health impacts associated with climate change. We weren't able to get to all the audience questions today, but we will use those questions to help inform the workshop, so thank you. You can register for the Climate at the National Academies newsletter to get updates on that workshop and on all the other climate work we have going on, and there is a bunch. Again, I invite you to join us for the inaugural Ramanathan Climate Conversation on November 17th, which will focus on how to develop resilience to climate change in South and East Asia, including related to disasters like heat waves, which they are very familiar with. As a final reminder, please share your feedback on today's event or your ideas for future events via the survey link. Lastly, thanks to everyone behind the scenes who supported today's event. Stay cool and have a good one.